And a good Thursday to you, Central Georgia. Hope your work week has been going nice and smooth sailing because, yes, the weather has been very quiet, and we have been talking about it the last couple of days. This stretch of really just immaculate weather, especially being below average for this time of year, pretty atypical, but that does look to be coming to an end, and that could start really as soon as this afternoon in terms of some warmer temperatures that we're forecasting as we head in throughout your Thursday afternoon. But a brief warm-up will continue, and I say brief warm-up because it's not going to last very long. By the time we're into this time next week, we won't even know what the warm-up did really even feel like over the past couple of days. But the temperatures will begin to drop as soon as Sunday. We do have some slim rain chances to talk about, and this morning, according to Future View, Saturday afternoon was looking a little bit iffy. So we'll go over the latest run of Future View, see what it has to say about the rain chances, and see if that is still reflected with two different model runs. Obviously, the first time it popped up this morning was the first time it was really showing some rain chances for your Saturday afternoon. If we see another model run, then we're more inclined to start believing, okay, there's some consistency behind this belief. But right now, as we go towards the 11 a.m. hour, a picture of clear blue sky all over Central Georgia. Not going to be this way throughout the rest of today. We could have some passing cloud cover associated with some of your rain chances, but overall it is going to be mostly sunny for the foreseeable future. Here's a look at your temperatures. Upper 70s. Everyone's still below the 80-degree mark. 79 at the warmest down in Cordele and Rochelle. And I don't quite think I see another 79 on the temperature map. So how does this match up against other areas of the country? And now our current temperature map, when you look at the eastern United States, is looking pretty typical of what we normally do see. Obviously, your cooler air is going to be up to the north, and down towards the south, we'll start to see more orange colors in nature. That's why you see 83s across Jacksonville, Orlando, over to New Orleans, and over in Laredo in southern Texas. So not one specific area is taking the cake for the warmest temperature here this Thursday. It does look like 83 is being matched across 4 separate locations. You'd have to go pretty local, probably somewhere down on the peninsula of Florida to find some values that are a little bit warmer than that. But it does look like we are seeing some of these warmer temperatures steadily push back up to the north. Mid 70s now in areas like Macon, Montgomery, upper 70s in Jackson, 79 over in Charleston. It doesn't quite look like that big trough of cooler air is really making its presence known as we go into the later portion of the work week. How about the dew point temperatures? Let's take a look at those, and you can see widespread light green, but also some patchy areas of dark green, like you see over here in Wilkinson County, stretching into Lawrence County, down across portions of Macon County, Dooley, and Criss counties. So it's going to be kind of a dividing line today. We are going to see some areas with dew point temperatures in the 70s, like down in Unadilla, Cordele, and Americus, and we're going to see most of Central Georgia hover somewhere in the mid to upper 60s, but that's still going to be kind of suitable humidity in order to increase maybe the feels like numbers this afternoon, and along with that, some scattered rain chances. But as of right now, it does look like this is kind of going to be the story throughout today, and it's the story across much of the southeast, besides over back into Mississippi, where you do see more of a dark green shade as opposed to light green. Alabama and Georgia are pretty similar right now. Some areas are relatively humid. You go down to South Georgia, just outside of Brunswick and St. Simons, there's a patch of very muggy air. But down in the state of Florida, it does look pretty typical of what it normally does during early September down there, with lots and lots of that swampy green. Here's a look at the feels like numbers. So some areas are actually hovering into the 80s already. Feels like 83 in Sandersville, 83 in Gordon, 84 up in Forsyth, and at the warmest, 85 down in Unadilla. So the warmer your dew point temperatures get, it's going to influence what it feels like outside just a little bit more. Obviously, I was talking about this very frequently over the months of June and July, and for the first part of the month of August. It's just been quite some time since we've seen feels like numbers that have kind of separated themselves from what the actual temperatures are. So there is a change in the winds. Yesterday, they were starting to come out of the east, but now they're filtering in from the south and the southwest. So anytime we get a southerly component with those winds, that can usher in some moisture that is farther down to the south. And that looks to be the case throughout today, but not going to overtake all of Central Georgia in terms of the very muggy air. And it does look like the farther north that you travel, you could run into a steady breeze of about 5, maybe 6 miles per hour. Overall, it's not really looking very impressive. Definitely not compared to Monday and Tuesday for your winds and your wind gusts. Hour by hour, your temperatures will continue to warm up into the mid 80s as we go just past lunchtime. Topping out at 87 is what this meteogram has. I think we'll take it another degree or two and we'll get very, very close to that average high number of 90 degrees this time of year. So we hit 83 on Monday, 84 on Tuesday, and then 86 yesterday for a high temperature. Steadily seeing the high temperature each and every afternoon climb up. The morning low temperatures, they haven't wavered too much. Obviously, Tuesday morning was definitely the coolest of the bunch, where we had plenty of upper 50s, maybe some mid 50s on the temperature map. But right there around 60 degrees, still well below average, but not necessarily making a run at the record lows anymore of 57. 101, the record back in 1925, and checking in on your year departure of rain, hovering around 6 3/4 of an inch above where we should be this time of year. Again, the more and more we go without rain, that number is going to decrease, but it only decreases about a 1/10 or 2 of an inch each and every day that we don't get anything in the way of rain. So overall, it is definitely looking like the dry stretch can continue for quite some time before it really starts to get that number back closer to average. 7-11 for your sunrise yesterday, and the sunset was at 7:56. Maybe about a 2-minute disagreement between the sunset time on, what was it? I'm trying to go back in my weeks, Tuesday evening, and as opposed to what we did have yesterday. So today, kind of marking the last cool morning that we'll see. And when I mean cool morning, having that fall feel as you walk outside, maybe needing some form of a light jacket. We won't have temperatures in the low 60s, near 60 anymore. It looks like we're going to be back closer to average over the next couple of days. A few showers are in the forecast later this afternoon. That southwesterly breeze blowing from about 5 to maybe 15 miles per hour throughout today. And a high temperature of 89 is what I have forecasted for today. So right on the cusp of 90 degrees. But 7-11 was once again that sunrise time this morning. It was beautiful by all means, and it continues to be a beautiful picture across the quad view that we did just take a look at. Plenty of blue skies far and wide, but you're going to want to know what it feels like outside. So while we may not necessarily hit that 90-degree mark itself for the actual temperature today, your heat indices are expected to peak somewhere around 90, maybe a degree or two above that 90-degree threshold. And we'll start to feel like the 90-degree mark by as soon as 1 p.m. We'll hang around in that range all the way through the afternoon, indicating that whatever starts to fall in the way of rain not going to really play a significant role with cooling some of those temperatures down. And now taking a look at your feels like numbers into the evening hours. So 7, 8, and 9 o'clock. Maybe if you have any dinner plans with friends and family, it's still feeling like the 80s. So we're a little bit slower to dip down into the 70s. That's going to be well into the nighttime hours. But hey, NFL's kicking off tonight. Maybe watching some Thursday night football, want to go outside. Just enjoy some of that cooler air as the game's wrapping up around 11 p.m. 77 degrees should be kind of what the feels like numbers are at, but you may notice the humidity a tad bit more than what we've been noticing over the last couple of days. Satellite and radar picture continues to be crystal clear here in central Georgia. A couple minuscule sprinkles around the I-185 and the I-85 corridors right there on the Georgia-Alabama state line. There's also some cloud cover over towards the west that could be making its appearance into west central Georgia. But we're not seeing much in the way of rain. This was actually associated with some thunderstorms just a little while ago, halfway between Birmingham and Montgomery. There are some light showers in northern Georgia, maybe a couple of thunderstorms in western North Carolina that have fizzled out, but still not seeing really anything on this image. And that's kind of been the case over the last couple of days too. We've seen some passing cloud cover here and there, but we're reintroducing some slightly better rain chances as we go into this afternoon. I don't think it's going to be directly after lunchtime, but it is going to be sometime around that 2 to 3 o'clock window that some passing light showers could envelop maybe the northwestern half of central Georgia. If I had to pick which areas maybe had a more confident rain chance, overall, it still doesn't look like much in the way of rain. If you record any rain today, it's probably going to be pretty minuscule amounts. I definitely doubt that anyone's going to get above an inch in recorded rainfall, maybe not even above the half-inch mark. So rain will fizzle out as we go overnight. Temperatures are cooling, and then we'll start out Friday mostly clear. There are some clouds in the picture, but the main direction that we look towards in the morning hours is going to be over to the east of us. Do we have any cloud cover over here that's maybe going to block the image of the sunrise? Doesn't quite look like that's going to be the case either. It's once we go into the second half of Friday that maybe some changes are on the horizon. So let's see what Future View has to say. Obviously, still some great outdoor lunch weather for your Friday to wrap up the shortened work week. Now we go into Friday around 4 p.m. Okay, scattered light showers all over the state of Georgia, including back over into Alabama. Do any of those come to fruition for football Friday night? Well, some of the showers are hanging in the picture, so you do have a chance of seeing some showers throughout your Friday evening plans. And then as we go into the nighttime hours, there's still some rain trying to hang around. It does look like this is 2 model runs in a row that we see good agreement. The rain chances will be farther to the north as we go throughout Saturday. That's not set in stone by any means, but just trying to give you a better idea about how to plan out any plans that you have for the beginning of the weekend and especially football Friday night. Obviously, I'll kind of pair this image up with what I'm seeing tomorrow when I come into work and really fine-tune that FFN forecast. But just have the rain jacket maybe on standby, ready to go in case you do need it. Overall, the good likelihood is you're probably not going to need anything in the way of a rain jacket. And then once again, just like each and every day that we saw throughout most of the summertime months, I know it still is summer, but those main summertime months, the month of June, the month of July, we see a lot of the rain fizzle out, and it's really not going to hold together when those temperatures are cooling overnight. So Saturday morning should start out nice, mostly clear to partly clear, and then we go into Saturday afternoon. Let's see how this scenario plays out, because the model run that came in this morning did hint at that front making its passage during that kind of prime heating window on Saturday, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. So when your temperatures are at their warmest, that's obviously going to lead to a lot of rising motion. You combine that with the lift ahead of this frontal boundary, it's going to be sufficient enough to sprout some scattered rain chances, and that does look to be the case right now for your Saturday afternoon plans. And obviously, I think the big thing that you'll want to know, you're going to be focusing on maybe Atlanta, maybe Athens, Georgia, maybe heading up to watch Georgia and Austin Peay, going to watch Georgia Tech this weekend. It does look like the rain is going to clear out as we go throughout the early afternoon, maybe transitioning into the late afternoon time frame. But not only are we seeing a couple scattered showers, maybe even some indications of some pockets where you could hear a couple rumbles of thunder. You could get some heavy rain for just a little bit. Well, right now, this latest run of Future View is hinting at a later passage of this boundary around 4 p.m. This was a definitive line, the last model run, all across right smack dab in the middle of central Georgia. We're not really seeing that agreement much more, but it does look like scattered rain chances are going to remain not only in the picture here, but they also could remain in the picture for Atlanta and Athens if you do have plans to travel up there this weekend. And then as we go into the nighttime hours Saturday, that's when your rain chances finally get out of the picture. Overall, right now it is looking like Saturday, pretty definitive rain chance. I still went with about a 20% chance of rain because these 2 most recent model runs are the only ones really popping up that those scattered showers and maybe some scattered storms. We haven't seen any of that pop up according to the long range models and according to the model runs of Future View last evening. So main thing that you'll want to know right now as we fine tune the rain chances as we get closer to your Saturday plans is the warming trend. We probably won't hit the 90-degree mark today, but we very likely could. And if we don't hit it today, well, it looks very likely that we'll hit it for your Friday. I have a forecasted high of 92 degrees. Notice that uptick in the morning low temperature. That's obviously not the number that you really pay attention to the most on these graphics or the 7-day forecast, but not to discount. They obviously are going to give you a good indication of what the temperatures are as you're walking out the door. 67 is still feeling very nice, but it's a pretty good increase from 60 degrees, which was our low this morning, 68 on Saturday, and that's going to be right on average for what the morning low is this time of year. And then Saturday should be the warmest of the next 7 days. High temperatures in the mid-90s, around 94 degrees. But both of these days, Friday and Saturday, you're probably going to see some feels like numbers that hover 1, 2 to maybe even 3 degrees warmer, and they could even be a little bit warmer than that if your dew point temperatures do decide to soar up into the 70s, maybe even into the low 70s in a select few areas. So it's going to be a bit more of a taste of that typical summertime forecast over the next 3 days as compared to this very pleasant and dry stretch that we have been on, with the exception of those dreary periods, of course, that maybe have crowded last weekend, maybe have crowded the weekend before. But hopefully you can dodge the rain throughout your Friday evening. Saturday, I put the thunderstorm icon on there because I do believe that's when your temperatures are going to be the warmest. That's when our humidity could be the highest. that would be a more suitable environment for sprouting some pockets of heavier rain. And of course, along with that, going to have your fair share of scattered rumbles of thunder, but still a 20% chance as of right now. I imagine Ben might give this an uptick by the time he comes in the evening hours, and I'll continue to see how the model runs tomorrow morning are comparing to what I did see this morning, and then we can kind of make a good assumption about a better rain chance, maybe a 30 or a 40%, but right now I'm not even seeing anything necessarily above that 40% chance. So your afternoon high temperatures, I did mention 94 is going to be the warmest that we get, down to 89 on Sunday. We've seen some fluctuation, maybe hovering around 90 for Sunday, maybe hovering around 89 degrees. All in all, it will be slightly cooler on Sunday, but you're not really going to feel it whatsoever because those temperatures, yes, they're not as high as the mid 90s. However, it is going to be just as warm as today. So today's going to be a good sample size and kind of a feel before we get into Sunday. So that's really going to give you a good indication of how that atmosphere will feel as we wrap up the weekend. But then we finally see the drop down to 82 degrees for your Monday. That's about a 12-degree temperature drop between Saturday all the way into Monday over a period of 48 hours. So your morning lows, like I said, probably not going to have that fall feel in the air after we got through this morning. 67, 68, and 69 degrees, a steady uptick in those numbers all throughout your weekend. But then we finally see that drop in the morning lows along with the afternoon high temperatures as we go into Monday, 65 degrees. So a little bit farther below average, but we don't stop there. We, in fact, are going to welcome back in the lower 60s as we roll into next week. So humidity day by day. Obviously, right now it's forecasted to be at its highest, kind of teeter-tottering between the 60s and maybe getting to around 70 degrees. I still think the humidity is going to hover really right on this line. I think it would be a little bit higher if I got to make this manually and kind of hover on that white line that you see going into Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday. I think we'll start to feel the impacts of some slightly drier air, but it's all going to be dependent on how far south that frontal boundary that's moving through on Saturday is going to push down towards the south. If it's still pretty close to us in central Georgia, then the humidity and the dew point temperature is probably going to hover a little bit more on the side of what we're feeling the next couple of days as opposed to this drier air that looks to settle in Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But eventually that drier air will be pretty widespread. It looks like we'll have maybe a day 2 or 3 that we're going to hover in this comfortable box with dew point temperatures in the 50s, and that's going to be good enough for some areas of no shaded color on the dew point temperatures map. We're going to keep our fingers crossed. Obviously, I'm a cold weather lover or a cooler weather lover, but if you're a fan of the summertime heat, it got a little bit too cool, a little bit too early, then the next couple of days are going to be quite a treat. But when you have warm temperatures, you have humidity back in the forecast, that can lead to scattered shower and maybe even some storm chances each and every afternoon. And that's going to be the case now all the way through Sunday. Again, Sunday's still a little bit iffy in terms of what our rain chances will be. I know the long range models aren't showing much, but they weren't showing much for most of Saturday all week long. And that looks to be our most impressive rain chance that we've seen so far this week. It looks like plenty of rain chances still linger over to the east and the northeast of us. Again, if that frontal boundary sags a little bit farther to the south, we're going to be a little bit farther away. So that's going to kind of act as an axis and a focal point of where the lift is going to be. And obviously on the southern side of that boundary, you're still going to have the hot and the humid conditions. Behind it, you'll have cooler and drier air that's going to try to filter in from the north and the northwest. But right now, the GFS and the European are both kind of maintaining the idea that, hey, I think we probably will see that cooler and drier air by the time we roll into the later portion of Sunday, and definitely as we go into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But that front could kind of meander. It could kind of park itself just to the south of us. It could sag down to the south a little bit more. It could move up to the north just a little bit. So the farther south that you live in central Georgia, I think you have some better chances of at least some scattered showers throughout Monday, maybe even lingering into Tuesday. But it does look like good agreement that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, all of those rain chances do remain well down to the south and the southeast of us. Kind of a fine line right here, and you definitely see your fair share of cloud cover. That wouldn't be a bad thing. That's going to inhibit the warm up even a little bit more, combined with the cooler and drier air that hopefully will settle in by the time we get into next week. And then we flash forward to Thursday, still not seeing anything that really looks conducive in the way of rain chances. But once you get into 5 to 7 days out, you definitely can see a lot of fluctuation between these model runs. We'll continue to keep a close eye on it, but the big indication that you're seeing is that front passing through. And yes, it may stall down towards the south of us, but it does look like cooler and drier air is going to filter in once again, and especially up in the northern portion of the state. So maybe you have a business trip up to the Atlanta area next week. Maybe you're heading out of town to a conference. You're going to feel that cooler and drier air a little bit better than we would down here in central Georgia. So let's check in on the tropics. And obviously you just got a good picture of the long range models a week out ahead of time. We didn't see anything trying to organize in the way of maybe a tropical system, even off the Atlantic coast in the near vicinity of us. So that's a good indication that this tropical wave that we continue to monitor each time we get updates is not going to impact us over the next week. It may be into next weekend, but that's if it gets its act together and moves towards us. But I'll kind of talk about my general thinking of this after we go over the percent chances of development. Between the 2 and the 8 a.m. updates today, we saw a slight uptick. It was at a 40% chance of development over the next 2 days, and it was at a 70% chance of developing over the next 7 days. Well, we saw both of those numbers increase 10%. So now about a 50-50 shot that this system does get named storm status over the next 48 hours, and an even greater likelihood that it will develop past that 48-hour window. We've been talking about it the last couple of days, and ever since we saw this red shaded area with high chances of development, it does look very likely that this will be our next named storm in the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. And we'll go over the name list one more time after this graphic. But this is going to continue to move kind of directly over towards the west. So areas right now that are going to be the first to feel the impacts, obviously all the fish out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean first and foremost, but then land masses, the Lesser Antilles, so getting over there into the Eastern Caribbean, obviously probably increasing the rip currents off the coast of northern South America. But then past that, it's still pretty uncertain where the system is going to go. Is it going to take that northward turn like Aaron and Fernand did, or is it going to go directly into the Caribbean Sea and then maybe make a northward turn as it gets into the West Caribbean, the Northwest Caribbean, areas that are going to be south of Cuba, south of Hispaniola, getting over towards Jamaica? Still, once again, anyone's best guess past the end of this shaded area, but if this is to get a named storm, or get named storm status, excuse me, kind of stuttering on my words when I'm trying to say that. But if this is to get named storm status, then we would get a cone forecast with that. And that's going to give us a pretty good indication of which areas and the general direction that this system could be heading. But it does look likely that you will see a new named storm over the period of maybe the next 2 days, maybe even getting into as late as Sunday. But overall, the next name that we are talking about is our 7th named storm of the hurricane season, at least here in the Atlantic. Over on the Pacific side, they're already at the L name, so they have definitely been making faster progress than we have. And Gabrielle is that next name, so the G name, and then we will move over to the second column, which starts with Umberto with the H name. So obviously hasn't been terribly active so far in the tropics, and I know, knock on wood when I say something like that, but it just hasn't really been the hurricane season that NOAA's forecasted so far, and Colorado State. But that's just maybe, or what I'm trying to say is don't count your chickens before they hatch, because obviously you can get a very late start to hurricane season. We saw it as recently as last year. Hurricane Helene fired up as we went into the later portion of September. So I think we're already making better progress than what we saw as of last year, because we're looking to cross off that G name. Next would be the H name. So Hurricane Helene happened in late September last year, ended up being an above average hurricane season. So that indicating that the month of October was a fairly active month, and we can cross off our fair share of names here as we go well into the rest of the months of hurricane season. The official peak is going to be happening in a little less than a week. That will be on September 10th, so that is going to be next Wednesday. Typically the date on average where we see the best frequency of tropical storms and hurricanes out in the Atlantic Basin. But like I said, it's a very similar setup to what we did have last year. We don't necessarily have the exact same setup, the most conducive environment, but it's very similar, and we don't really have any of those big oceanic patterns that are impacting our hurricane season forecast. So I would believe that we'll probably have our fair share of activity going through the second half of September, going into October, and then finally once we transition into November, we probably will see a bit of a lull in activity. Typically, November is not a very active month of hurricane season, but it still goes all the way until the end of the month of November, and then you won't have to hear us talk about tropics whatsoever. So your 7-day forecast, this is all you need to know for the next week. We'll talk about the tropics if it does pertain to our forecast, but right now with these frontal boundaries that continue to pass through and kind of stall down to the south and southeast of us, I think those are going to kind of act as steering mechanisms. If anything does decide to creep close to us in central Georgia, it's going to help steer those back out into the Atlantic Ocean, but it remains to be seen. We can see those frontal boundaries fall apart and dissolve in nature. Then there's not necessarily a blocking mechanism that we would have anymore. So taking a look at your 7-day, we are going to see that brief warm up over the next couple of days. We've really seen it over the last 3 days. So yes, in terms of the entire duration of this warm up, maybe not necessarily brief, but in terms of the numbers being in the low to mid 90s, that period is going to be very brief because the cooler air is going to start to impact your forecast as we go into Sunday, and then I think the drier air will follow. Kind of the opposite of what we were talking about with the last front that moved through. The drier air made its presence known before that cooler air, but also maybe the combination of some lingering cloud cover Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday is going to lead to even more of a temperature drop. Maybe this cooler air would only drop these numbers into the mid 80s, but with all the cloud cover obviously blocking that sunshine and that surface heating each and every day, well, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are looking to hover in the lower half of the 80s. And I did promise you that some low 60s would be back in the forecast. 62 for a morning low on Tuesday, 61 as we go into Wednesday. Hopefully we can see some more upper 50s, and obviously that's just my personal preference. If you do enjoy the warmer temperatures, then hold on to this weather we have the next couple of days for as long as you can. Again, I do believe Saturday might get a bit of an uptick in those rain chances, but football Friday night, just plan on the chance of a shower. Hopefully you won't need any of the rain gear whatsoever, but when you have heat and you have humidity back in your forecast, these are the kind of rain chances that you can see when we don't have any big scale weather systems impacting our forecast. But when we have more of a driving force and something that does provide more organization, like the front coming through on Saturday, that is going to create some more widespread rain chances. But still, right now, what I would forecast for basically the entire state of Georgia is going to be widely scattered showers and maybe a couple of storms. But still, none look to be of the severe criteria, just kind of your typical summertime thunderstorm where it gets quite loud outside and quite messy for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then you allow that to pass through, and then you're looking good to go for the rest of the day. So I have the rain gear handy for the first part of this weekend. Hopefully we can take away these rain chances on Sunday, but we'll get a better view of that tomorrow on Future View. And again, be sure to tune in here at 10:30 tomorrow. I'll be breaking down your FFN specific forecast, your Georgia football, your Georgia Tech football specific forecast, everything that you need to know for your weekend ahead. And obviously I know a lot of you are looking forward to it after this shortened work week and still having a bit of that Labor Day hangover, just really dreary and dreading going back to work. Don't worry, you get through today, you get through one more day of work, and then you have another 3 days off, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you once again back here at 10:30.